The history of Gibraltar portrays how the rock gained an importance and a reputation far exceeding its size, influencing and shaping the people who came to reside here over the centuries. Prehistoric evidence of hominid inhabitation of the rock dates back to the Neanderthals. A Neanderthal skull was discovered in Forbes Quarry in 1848, prior to the original discovery in the Neander Valley. In 1926, the skull of a Neanderthal child was found in Devil's Tower. Mousterian deposits found at Gorham's Cave, which are associated with Neanderthals in Europe, have been dated to as recently as 28,000 to 24,000 BP, leading to suggestions that Gibraltar was one of the last places of Neanderthal habitation. Modern humans apparently visited the Gibraltar area in prehistoric times after the Neanderthal occupancy. While the rest of Europe was cooling, the area around Gibraltar back then resembled a European Serengeti. Leopards, hyenas, lynxes, wolves and bears lived among wild cattle, horses, deer, ibexes, oryxes and rhinos, all surrounded by olive trees and stone pines, with partridges and ducks overhead, tortoises in the underbrush and mussels, limpets and other shellfish in the waters. Clive Finlayson, evolutionary biologist at the Gibraltar Museum, said, "This natural richness of wildlife and plants in the nearby sandy plains, woodlands, shrublands, wetlands, cliffs and coastline probably helped the Neanderthals to persist." Evidence at the cave shows the Neanderthals of Gibraltar likely used it as a shelter for 100,000 years. Cro-Magnon man took over Gibraltar around 24,000 BCE. Ancient. The Phoenicians are known to have visited the rock circa 950 BC and named the rock Calp. The Carthaginians also visited. However, neither group appears to have settled permanently. Plato refers to Gibraltar as one of the Pillars of Hercules along with Jebel Musa and Monte Hacho on the other side of the strait. The Romans visited Gibraltar, but no permanent settlement was established. Following the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Gibraltar was occupied by the Vandals and later the Goths kingdoms. The Vandals did not remain for long, although the Visigoths remained on the Iberian Peninsula from 414 to 711. The Gibraltar area and the rest of the South Iberian Peninsula was part of the Byzantine Empire during the second part of the 6th century, later reverting to the Visigoth kingdom. Muslim rule. 711 The 30th of April, the Umayyad general Tariq ibn Ziyad, leading a Berber-dominated army, sailed across the strait from Ceuta. He first attempted to land on Algeciras but failed. Upon his failure, he landed undetected at the southern point of the rock from present-day Morocco in his quest for Spain. It was here that Gibraltar was named, coming from the Arabian words Gabal al-Tariq. Little was built during the first 4 centuries of Moorish control. 1160 The Almohad Sultan Abd al-Mumin ordered that a permanent settlement, including a castle, be built. It received the name of Medinat al-Fah. On completion of the works in the town, the Sultan crossed the strait to inspect the works and stayed in Gibraltar for 2 months. The Tower of Homage of the castle remains standing today. 1231 After the collapse of the Almohad Empire, Gibraltar was taken by Ibn Hud, Taifa Emir of Murcia. 1237 Following the death of Ibn Hud, his domains were handed over to Muhammad ibn Asa, the founder of the Nasrid Kingdom of Granada. Therefore, Gibraltar changed hands again. 1274 The second Nasrid king, Muhammad II al-Faqih, gave Gibraltar over to the Marinids as payment for their help against the Christian kingdoms. 1309 While the King Ferdinand IV of Castile laid siege on Algeciras, Alonso Perez de Guzman was sent to capture the town. This was the first siege of Gibraltar. The Castilians took the upper rock from where the town was bombarded. The garrison surrendered after 1 month. Gibraltar then had about 1,500 inhabitants. 1310, the 31st of January, Gibraltar was granted its first charter by the King Ferdinand IV of Castile. Being considered a high-risk town, the charter included incentives to settle such as the offering of freedom from justice to anyone who lived in Gibraltar for 1 year and 1 day. This fact marked the establishment of the Gibraltar Council. 1316, Gibraltar was unsuccessfully besieged by the Nasrid Qajafiyah. 1333, June, a Marinid army, led by Abd al-Malik, the son of Abul Hassan, the Marinid Sultan, recovered Gibraltar after a 5-month siege. King Alfonso XI of Castile attempted to retake Gibraltar aided by the fleet of the Castilian Admiral Alonso Jafre Tenorio. Even a ditch was dug across the isthmus. While laying the siege, the king was attacked by a Nasrid army from Granada. Therefore, the siege ended in a truce, allowing the Marinids to keep Gibraltar. 1344, March, after the 2-year siege of Algeciras. Algeciras was taken over by the Castilian forces. Therefore, Gibraltar became the main Marinid port in the Iberian Peninsula. During the siege, Gibraltar played a key role as the supply base of the besieged. 1349, Gibraltar was unsuccessfully besieged by the Castilian forces led by the King Alfonso XI. 1350, the siege was resumed by Alfonso XI. It was again unsuccessful, mainly due to the arrival of the Black Death, which decimated the besiegers, causing the death of the king. 1369, as the civil war in Castile came to an end, with the murder of King Peter I by the pretender Henry, the Nasrid king of Granada, Muhammad V, former ally of Peter, took over Algeciras after the 3-day siege of Algeciras. 10 years later, the city was razed out to the ground, and its harbour made unusable. This fact increased again the importance of Gibraltar, yet in Marinid hands, in the Strait trade. A subsequent truce was signed between Muhammad and Henry, preventing the Christian kings from attempting to recover the city. 1374, following a period of internal instability in the Marinid Sultanate of Fez, Abu al-Abbas Ahmad of Fez asked for Muhammad V of Granada help, possibly as a condition of the alliance or as reward for Muhammad's successful expedition to Africa. Gibraltar was handed over to the Nasrids of Granada. 1410, the garrison in Gibraltar mutinied against the King of Granada and declared for the King of Fez. Fayed sent his brother Abu Said over to Gibraltar to take possession of the city. He also took over other Nasrid ports such as Marbella and Estepona. 1411, the son of Yusuf III of Granada, Ahmad, recovered Marbella and Estepona. Next, it laid siege to Gibraltar and recovered the city for the Kingdom of Granada. 1436, Enrique de Guzman, second Count of Niebla, with large estates in southern Andalusia, assaulted Gibraltar. However, his attack was repelled and Castilian forces suffer heavy losses. Castilian, Spanish rule. 1462 to the 20th of August, Castilian forces captured Gibraltar. An immediate dispute broke out between the House of Medina Sidonia and the House of Arcos about the possession of the town. Finally, the initiative of Juan Alonso de Guzman, 1st Duke of Medina Sidonia, succeeded and he took possession of the town as personal property. However, the King of Castile, Henry IV, declared Gibraltar to be crown property and not the personal property of the Guzman family. Henry IV IV restored the charter granted to Gibraltar in 1310 and took two additional measures. The lands previously belonging to Algeciras were granted to Gibraltar, and the status of collegiate church was solicited from the Pope Pius II and granted to the parish church of St. Mary the Crown, now the Cathedral of St. Mary the Crown, on the site of the old main Moorish mosque. St. Bernard of Clairvaux, whose feast falls on the 20th of August, became the patron saint of Gibraltar. 1463 In a tour through Andalusia, Henry IV was the first Christian monarch to visit Gibraltar. 1467 July, in the midst of a nobility revolt against the king, the forces of the Duke of Medina Sidonia, after a 16-month siege, took Gibraltar. Alfonso of Castile, half-brother of Henry IV and puppet pretender handled by the nobility, granted him the lordship of Gibraltar. 1469 The 3rd of June, after the death of Alfonso de Castilla and the first Duke of Medina Sidonia, his son and heir Enrique de Guzman, second Duke of Medina Sidonia, changed Sidon in reward, saw the status of Gibraltar as part of the domains of the Duke, confirmed by the Queen Isabel I of Castile. 1470 The 20th of December, a new charter was granted to the town of Gibraltar, now a nobiliary town, based in the Antiqua Charter. 1478 The 30th of September, the Catholic monarchs granted the title of Marquess of Gibraltar to the Duke of Medina Sidonia. 1479 The 20th of January, Queen Isabella I of Castile and King Ferdinand II of Aragon, the Catholic monarchs, jointly ruled the kingdoms of Castile and Aragon, including Gibraltar. 1492 to the 31st of March, after conquering Granada, the Catholic monarchs signed the Alhambra decree ordering the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, to take effect from the 31st of July 1492. Many passed through Gibraltar on the way into exile in North Africa. 1492 Summer, after the death of the former Duke, his son and heir Juan Alfonso Pérez de Guzman, 3rd Duke of Medina Sidonia, saw his lordship over Gibraltar reluctantly renewed by the Catholic monarchs. 1497 Gibraltar became the main base in the conquest of Melilla by the troops of the Duke of Medina Sidonia. 1501 The 2nd of December, acknowledging the importance of the town, the Catholic monarchs asked the Duke of Medina Sidonia for the return of Gibraltar to the domains of the Crown. The Duke accepted the royal request and ceded the town to the monarchs. 1502 The 2nd of January, Garcilaso de la Vega took possession of the town on behalf of the Queen Isabel I of Castile. 1502 The 10th of July, by a royal warrant passed in Toledo by Isabella I of Castile, Gibraltar was granted its coat of arms, an escutcheon on which the upper two-thirds shall be a white field, and on the said field set a red castle, and below the said castle, on the other third of the escutcheon, which must be a red field in which there must be a white line between the castle and the said red field, there shall be a golden key which hangs by a chain from the said castle, as are here figured. The castle and key remain the arms of Gibraltar to this day. 1506 Alleging a false donation by the King Philip I of Castile, the Duke of Medina Sidonia attempted to recover Gibraltar by besieging the town. The siege was unsuccessful and the Duke was admonished by the Regency and forced to pay a fee to the town. The town received the title of Most Loyal City. The Duke died in 1507. 1516 The 14th of March, Spain becomes a united kingdom under Charles I. 1540 The 8th of September, corsairs from the Barbary coast landed at Gibraltar in 16 galleys, looting the town and taking away many captives. 1552 After the requests from the inhabitants of the town, Charles I of Spain sent the Italian engineer Giovanni Battista released a cavalry to strengthen the defences of the town. A wall was built, also a ditch by the wall of the town and a drawbridge at the land port. 1567 Juan Mateos turned his large house in the upper town into a hospital. It was Gibraltar's first hospital, and remained on the same site serving the people of Gibraltar for almost 4.5 centuries. 1606 The Moriscos were expelled from Spain by King Philip III. Many passed through Gibraltar on the way into exile in North Africa. 1607 The 25th of April, during the 80 Years' War between the United Provinces and the King of Spain, a Dutch fleet surprised and engaged a Spanish fleet anchored at the Bay of Gibraltar. 1621 Second Battle of Gibraltar, on which a Spanish squadron crushed the VOC at the Strait of Gibraltar. Battle of Gibraltar. 1649 Typhoid epidemic in the town. 1656 In a letter to Councillor General Montague, General at Sea in one of the Protector's personal friends, Cromwell mentioned the necessity of securing a permanent base at the entry of the Mediterranean, preferably Gibraltar. The War of the Spanish Succession. 1700 The 1st of November, King Charles II of Spain died, leaving no descendants. In the autumn he had made a will bequeathing the whole of the Spanish possessions to Prince Philip of Bourbon, a grandson of Louis XIV, backed by France. The other pretender, an Austrian Habsburg, Archduke Charles, supported by the Holy Roman Empire. England and the Netherlands did not accept Charles II's testament. 1701 September, England, the Netherlands and Austria signed the Treaty of The Hague. By this treaty, they accepted Philippe of Anjou as King of Spain, but allotted Austria the Spanish territories in Italy and the Spanish Netherlands. England and the Netherlands, meanwhile, were to retain their commercial rights in Spain. Later, Portugal, Savoy and some German states joined the alliance. 1702 May, a formal beginning of the War of the Spanish Succession. 1703 The 12th of February, the Archduke Charles was proclaimed King of Castile and Aragon in Vienna. He took the name of Charles III. The Gibraltar capture. 1704 The 1st of August. During the War of the Spanish Succession, and when returning from a failed expedition to Barcelona, an Anglo-Dutch fleet, under the command of Sir George Rooke, chief commander of the Alliance Navy, began a new siege. They demanded its unconditional surrender and an oath of loyalty to the Habsburg pretender to the Spanish throne, the Archduke Charles. The governor of Gibraltar, Diego de Salinas, refused the ultimatum. A brigade of Dutch Royal Marines and Royal Marines, 1,800 strong, under the command of Prince George of Hesse-Darmstadt, chief commander of the Alliance Army in Spain, began to besiege Gibraltar in the name of the Archduke Charles. A small group of Spaniards, mainly Catalans, were integrated in the troops of the Prince of Hesse. 1704 Night of 3 to 4 August, heavy shelling targeted the castle and the town. 1704 The 4th of August, the governor Diego de Salinas surrendered the town to Prince George of Hesse, who took it in the name of Archduke as Charles III, King of Castile and Aragon. This was the end of the 11th Siege of Gibraltar. The exact beginning of the English-British control of Gibraltar is hard to determine. For the 18th century, Spanish sources reported that immediately after the takeover of the city, Sir George Rooke, the British admiral, on his own initiative caused the British flag to be hoisted, and took possession of the rock in name of Anne, Queen of Great Britain, whose government ratified the occupation. On the other hand, even the British or the Gibraltarians sometimes date the beginning of British sovereignty in 1704. Also, some British sources have accounted the flag story. However, it is claimed by present-day historians, both Spanish and British, that this version is apocryphal since no contemporary source accounts it. Isidro Sepulveda, William Jackson and George Hills explicitly refuted. What does seem nowadays prove is that the British troops who had landed on the South Mole area raised the flag to signal their presence to the ships, and avoid being fired upon by their own side. However, whatever the exact events of the time, Gibraltar ceased being under the rule of Philip V of Spain in 1704. A statue to Sir George Rooke was erected in 2004 as part of the centenary celebrations. 1704-7 August. After the surrender, despite the efforts of the senior officers to maintain order, the civil population of Gibraltar suffered at the hands of the troops. Homes were plundered, there were cases of rape, churches were ransacked, religious symbols destroyed, and Catholic churches pressed into service for use as stores or for other military uses. The townspeople took reprisals, murdering Dutchmen and Englishmen and throwing the corpses to wells and cesspits. When discipline was restored, in spite of assurances that Spaniards who wished to remain would enjoy freedom of religion and full civil rights, almost all villages decided not to run the risk of staying and left in exile. 1704, the 7th of August, a dejected procession, numbering some 4,000 according to most of the sources, such as Hills. Jackson filed out of the land port with Queen Isabella's banner at the head, and led by the Spanish governor, Diego de Salinas, the Spanish garrison, with the 3 brass cannon, the religious orders, the city council and all those inhabitants who did not wish to take the oath of allegiance to Charles III as asked by the terms of surrender. They took with them the symbols and objects of Spanish Gibraltar's history, the council and ecclesiastical records, including the historical documents signed by the Spanish Catholic monarchs in 1502, granting Gibraltar's coat of arms, and the statue of the St. Mary the Crown. Most of them took refuge in the proximity of the nearby chapel of San Roque, possibly hoping for a rapid reconquest of Gibraltar, which never materialized. There a new settlement was formed, being granted a council 2 years later, with the name of San Roque, and being considered by the Spanish crown as the heir to the lost town of Gibraltar. King Philip V of Spain dubbed San Roque as my city of Gibraltar, resident in its Campo. Others settled down in what today is Los Barrios, or even further away, in the ruins of the abandoned city of Algeciras. Only about 70 people remained in the town, most of them religious people without family or belonging to the Genoese trader colony. 1704, the 24th of August, the Alliance fleet, under the command of Rooke, set sail from Gibraltar and intercepted a joint Spanish-French fleet that attempted to recover Gibraltar by the coast of Malaga. The result was uncertain, with heavy losses on both sides, but the Spanish-French fleet was stopped and prevented from arriving at Gibraltar. The First Spanish Siege 1704, the 5th of September, troops of France and Spain under the Marquis of Villadarias, general captain of Andalusia, started to besiege Gibraltar to try to recover it. In the town, the Marine Brigade, still under the command of the British Admiral Sir John Leake, and the governor, Prince George of Hesse-Darmstadt, and reinforced shortly before by a further 400 Royal Marines, held the fortress against repeated attacks. 1704, the 11th of November, a notable incident during the siege. 500 Spanish volunteer grenadiers tried to surprise the garrison after being led up a concealed path to the top of the rock by a Spanish goatherd. From Gibraltar, Simon Soussart, Captain Fisher of the Marines, with 17 of his men, successfully defended the Round Tower against their assault. A contemporary report of this noted defense says, encouraged by the Prince of Hesse, the garrison did more than could humanly be expected, and the English Marines gained an immortal glory. 1705 January, Philip V replaced Villadarias with the Marshal of France de Tessé. 1705 the 7th of February, the last assault before the arrival of de Tessé was executed. The Gibraltar Wall was damaged, but French troops refused to go on until the arrival of de Tessé. The assault becomes unsuccessful. 1705 the 31st of March, the Count de Tessé gave up the siege and retired. During the rest of the war, although nominally in the hands of the Archduke Charles, and garrisoned with both English and Dutch regiments, Britain began to monopolize the rule of the town, even if the formal transfer of sovereignty would not take place until the signature of the Treaty of Utrecht. The British governor and garrison become the de facto rulers of the town. 1705 the 2nd of August, the Archduke Charles stopped over in Gibraltar on his way to the territories of the Crown of Aragon. The Prince of Hesse joined him, thus leaving the town. The English Major General John Trimpton was left as governor. 1706 the 17th of February, Queen Anne, though not yet the legal ruler of the territory, declared Gibraltar a free port. 1707 the 24th of December, the first British governor directly appointed by Queen Anne, Roger Elliot, took up residence in the convent of the Franciscan Friars. 1711 the British government, then in the hands of the Tories, covertly ordered the British Gibraltar governor, Thomas Stanwix, to expel any foreign troops. Although he answered positively, he allowed a Dutch regiment to stay. It remained there until March 1713.